The internet is disappearing. That was Eric Schmidt talking at Davos World Conference in January of this year. He was speaking in an interview that was being webcast all around the world. And these words caused a little bit of an internet sensation. Now, it's a very clever use of words. He didn't say vanishing, he didn't say ceasing to exist, he used the word disappearing. Now, what he's saying that as any technology becomes sufficiently advanced, it becomes indistinguishable from magic. It stops being apparent. And that's where we are with the internet today. It is ubiquitous, it is everywhere, and it's growing. Now, to kind of give some context as to how we've got where we are, I'd like to talk a little bit about the internet of the 90s, of when I first experienced the internet. Now, my first modem was a 28K hulking beige box because all computing was beige in the 90s. It was a little like a shoebox. It had one great big metal switch to turn it on. It made a noise that was reminiscent of today's dubstep. It was a screeching, horrible, noisy thing. So the internet was very much a thing. It was a thing of active participation. I grew up in the army, which meant that my family lived away from their childhood homes of the northeast, which meant that there was always somebody on the phone, so I always had to wait for grandma to get off the phone, or my father who's on tour, or granddad, or somebody to get off the phone before I could get on the internet. So it really was a thing that you actively had to think about before you participated. It was most certainly a thing for geeky young boys. I was one of those geeky young boys to do before they discovered girls. And geeky older boys to do after they discovered that they couldn't talk to girls. So I was definitely in that young teenage boy who wasn't bothered at this time. Now, when you finally did get on the internet of 1995 was a mess. There was no search engines. There was no Google. There was no Bing. No Yahoo. There was Yahoo directories, which was like a really cut down version of the Yellow Pages. It was a thing that you discovered through magazines and through word of mouth, through other geeky boys. Now, I often found that the real participating thing for me in the internet is that there was just one phone line in the house, and that was in the cupboard under the stairs. And my mother was very house proud, and the cupboard was a sloping cupboard, so I had to get down and sit and haunch, and this is how I participated in the internet generally. It was very much an active thing, it wasn't a passive thing. By 1998 we could ask Jeeves, and by 1999 we could tell people about what we'd found on the internet through MSN Messenger, and that was a very active thing. People would sit all day playing on MSN Messenger, they're sending little smileys to each other. By 1999, we'd stopped asking Jeeves anyway, and we started Googling it. By 2002, 2003, we had ADSL and cable in urban areas, so the internet was still a thing, but it was still a thing that you did on your family computer. It was a one-computer house. Maybe you had another one at work, you started to get broadband. It no longer consumed the entire phone line, so it is a thing that you could do independently of the phone. But it was still something that you did. By 2007, the first iPhone was released. The internet was a thing that you could take away in your pocket, but it was still something that you did. You still downloaded your emails and you still browsed the web. By 2008, we had the iPhone 3G and the launch of Android and the App Store with 500 apps. And the emails were starting to be pushed to you. That was the first time that emails could be pushed outside of BlackBerry, but I won't talk about those. The internet was now something that could partially be consumed passively. By 2010, we had iPads. 2009, we had push notifications, and that facility was put into the hands of those geeky boys. Those geeky boys weren't geeky boys anymore. They were now called hipsters, and they were cool. They had big beards, and it wasn't just the remit of geography teachers with elbow pads and Morris Minors. It was, hipsters were cool. So. Those push notifications suddenly, as a developer community, we had the capability to push our own product, push our own ideas, and push our own information and touch points to millions and millions of consumers all around the world who are permanently connected. By 2010, we had the iPad and tablets, and devices. There was no such thing as the family device anymore. You had personal devices, and what you found now is that people were having breakfast with their iPhone, lunch on their desktop, and you'd eat dinner and watch TV with your iPad. It was a very passive thing. The internet now is a passive thing. So, what Eric Schmidt was alluding to is that there will be so many IP addresses, so many devices, so many sensors, things that you interact with, things that you engage with, that it will be part of your presence all of the time. Now, traditionally, there should be a graph there, but traditionally, the internet is run on something called IP4, which assigns a unique address to every device connected on the internet. Now that allows 4.3 billion devices. And since the 80s, people have been predicting something called IP exhaustion. In 2012, that started to happen. If you think there's 7.5 billion people on Earth, if everyone had one device, we'd be 50% short almost of devices. What Eric Schmidt was talking about was the introduction of IP6, and that allows 1 to the power of 128 unique addresses, which is roughly the same amount of atoms as there are on the surface of the Earth. Now, the lowest estimates are that there will be 25 billion devices connected to the internet by 2020. There's currently around about 3 or 4 billion. Which is around about 3 per person. If you look at the scale of growth in the developed world of 1.1 billion people, that number actually is closer to 12 devices per person by 2020, and that's the lowest estimate I've seen. SAP estimate around 50 billion, which is approximately 24 devices per person connected to the internet permanently in the developed world. There's the graph. Okay, so if you think about your day and the kind of things that you come into contact with every day, there are so many sensors and instruments that work just at the local level, and so much data that is consumed just at the local level. Your electricity meter in the home is just to say how much power you've used so that you can be sent a bill. The thermostat is used just, again, to turn the heating on and off. Water flow meters tell the utility company when there's been a leak. And traffic sensors tell you when to change the traffic lights because there's a car waiting. Now, if we start to add instrumentation to those devices and allow them to be coordinated by the things in our home and the things in the world around us to be coordinated by an intelligent device such as a smartphone, I want to get you to kind of think about the day that you would have as in a permanently connected world where everything's coordinated and everything has collective meaning powered by cloud services. So you have a meeting in the morning, you set your alarm for 6:30. Your alarm actually checks your calendar, sees you've got the 9 a.m. meeting, it checks the weather, it also checks the road conditions, and it sees there's a traffic jam on your route, so it sets your alarm 15 minutes early. You receive a notification to say you've been woken up early and this is the reason. Your heating, your smart heating system comes to life. It knows that you like your house 23 degrees. It doesn't use 1 iota of extra energy. The minute you wake up, your house is 23 degrees. You take a shower, you get on the scales. If you're anything like me, you might have looked at a cream cake, so you've put on 2 pounds. That information is gratuitously delivered to your fridge. Your fridge checks the inventory it has, and it suggests a nice peach halves and Greek yogurt meal. You begrudgingly agree to that. And in the meantime, the car's heating to the same 23 degrees, ready for your journey to work. Of course, the car is completely automated and powered by probably Google. And you get in the car, and it's time to suggest an appropriate playlist. Yesterday was a pretty terrible day. You've had your smartwatch has seen some hypertension. You left work 2 hours late. This is all based on your calendar. And you didn't stand up all day. So it suggests a nice acoustic playlist. You get in the car. You go to work. And in town, there's been a pipe burst. That information's been delivered to the local authority, which has then directed the emergency services and rerouted all the traffic. You get to work 6 minutes late. You barely even notice because you wanted to be in work early. Your smartphone picks up the fact that you've broken through the geofence. You've got to work. It sends a summary of everything that you've had with that client, every piece of communication you've had with the client up until this point, and it sends you a nice summary. You completely ace that meeting and you head out for lunch. You're subtly reminded that you put on £2 this morning, so you go for something healthy. You think, yes, I'm doing something about this. You sit down. You receive an email from your variable rate health insurance to say, actually, we know that you've not been doing too well lately, so we're putting your insurance up 10%. This is all you've been grassed up by your smartwatch. So you decide to leave work early, you go to the gym, you think, actually, I'm going to do something. Your smartwatch knows that based on your previous activity, your weight and your nutrition, that you burn exactly 408 calories. You get in the car, based on previous behaviour, your phone knows that after a good workout you like to listen to some death metal on the way home, so it suggests Rammstein. And halfway through, you get interrupted by a news report because in previous behaviour you've been interrupted, your music's been interrupted on the way home before. You decided to dismiss it, you're not interested, your phone knows never to interrupt Rammstein ever again. Up ahead, another Google car has an animal strayed into the road. It's 5 miles ahead. That car makes an emergency stop, communicates to all the other cars behind it that a collision almost occurred. You're 5 miles away. Your speed has been reduced by 2 miles an hour. You don't notice because you're rocking out to Rammstein. You're a few miles from home now. Your heating kicks in. Your smartphone tells you it's heating to kick in. And your house is at 23 degrees the moment you arrive home. You're still on the road. The fridge suggests some meals based on its inventory. It's been told about your epic workout, so it suggests some meals that are full of carbs. You pick a nice pasta carbonara. It says that that's going to deplete the entire inventory of ham and mushrooms, so it adds them to the shopping list. It also sends a notification to your wife, who says yes, likes the status, shares it on Facebook, and mentions how much of a well-trained house husband she has. And as you pull up on the drive, your car unlocks, your house unlocks, based on proximity technology at your home. That Rammstein song carries on through into your home entertainment system, but the minute it stops, based on previous behaviour, your phone knows that you do like to listen to the news whilst preparing food. You eat your meal, you put your dishes away. The dishwasher actually knows that tomorrow's Saturday. Saturday's a pretty big dish day, so it'll save the load, save the energy, and it'll do them with the morning dishes. You sit down to watch TV with your smart TV with your wife, and even though your favourite genre is horror, it suggests rom-coms because it knows that you're both at home and she always wins. You finish watching a terrible movie with Vince Vaughn, and she takes a bath. Your home entertainment system then localises the music and lighting in the room, and you decide it's been an epic day. You've been to the gym, you've listened to some Rammstein, and you've aced a meeting, so you go to bed. All of the stimulus is removed from your bedroom. But before you go to sleep, your calendar's checked by your smartphone. It sees that you've got a day at the races tomorrow, so it suggests an Uber taxi. You say yes, and the taxi arrives in the morning. So it sounds pretty far-fetched, but it's not. It's things that we're doing already. And there's a pretty simple equation that helps us think about how those things can be done. And it's thing plus instrument equals function plus service. Now, the thing is the thing that we encounter every day. It's your watch, it's it's a light bulb, it's the weighing scales. Now, the thing will still carry on performing its primary function. Your watch will still tell the time, the light bulb will still light the room, and the scales will still disappoint you every day. The instrument, however, is something that we can add. It's an effector or an actuator. It's something that we can add to add additional function to that thing. Now that can be something such as a proximity sensor, so as simple as like your home security lights. As you walk into a room, the lights can come on, and as you walk out, the lights go off. If you add a heart sensor to your watch, and it becomes a smartwatch. Now, if you combine those two things, your home has a little bit of its own central nervous system. Now the lights can come on when you enter the room, it can check how relaxed you are, and it can dim the lights to an appropriate setting. Now, if we think about that, that's a service, it's a local service. And it's a local service powered by your home. But if we expand that out into infrastructure and warehousing and retail, if all of those things can communicate, we can start to reduce energy usage, inventory management, and save time in everything that we do. Now, if you think about that as a connected world, it brings a whole new set of business models that we can actually adhere to as service providers. And forgive me that this isn't education-led, but I'm pretty sure you can think of your own implementations too. And the first one's physical freemium. If you're a supplier of light bulbs and you've been selling light bulbs for 70 years, why not give those light bulbs away for free? The average house might spend £8 or £9 a year on light bulbs. How about if you gave free light bulbs for life? And those light bulbs could now be completely powered by your smartphone. You could set the lighting and the mood based on an app powered on your smartphone. And instead, as the light bulb supplier, you charge for that service. You may charge £1.50 a month, £2 a month. Either way, you're more than tripling your revenue by giving away your product for free. The second one's digital lock-in. Now, as developers, we have been given the capability to use something in iOS called HomeKit, and that's Apple's attempt to join up manufacturers and developers. If manufacturers adhere to the HomeKit standards and developers adhere to the HomeKit standards, developers can build things that manufacturers make without having to communicate with each other. So we can build really joined up home solutions. It's the same with HealthKit too. The product itself can actually become its own point of sale. If you think about a fridge that has a screen inside, it's the perfect place for an M&S food advert. You know, there's a theme here. Can you see? And those products in your home now can perform their own servicing. Your boiler can check that it needs an annual service. It can check with British Gas or your service provider. And it can check your schedule, and it can say, actually, we can get an engineer out Monday, Wednesday, or Friday. You're not free any of those days, but your wife is. Should we book it in for Friday? And you can just confirm yes. Or even in the simpler case, your Nespresso coffee machine can order its own pods. Now, if you think about expanding that central nervous system out into a global scenario, and think about the effect that it has on public services, now the number 9 bus can tell the bus stand that it's meant to be at next, that it's going to be 4 minutes late. But everyone on that stand as well could also be told, based on their very own context and their very own journey, that if you take the number 6 and the number 4, you'll actually get there quicker. We've already talked about road traffic management. If every car communicates to itself, we can have double the amount of cars on our roads with no infrastructure change. Think about health. There's a Dutch company, I forget its name, but it's actually just started implanting health monitors into herds of cows. And this health monitor watches the nutrition that the cows are taking in, and it also watches their vital signs and their geolocation. And it can control the gates between different pastures. So when the quality of the pasture isn't great, the gates open and the cows move to pastures new. If you think about it as well, we've already talked about variable rate life insurance. You could also have health plans delivered that are explicitly tailored to your micro data of health, your heart rate, your hypertension, your nutrition, explicitly tailored to you. And in the worst case scenario, your watch could alert your doctor that you're having a heart attack. Now, in retail, we've already talked about inventory management. One of the things that we do is digital loyalty platforms. We build apps and point-of-sale systems that allow people to claim points or spend balances using their smartphone. As retailers, we can deliver highly targeted, timely messages based on consumers' physical activity. And in energy, in real terms, although we can mass store gas in today's world, there isn't a commercial solution to mass store electricity. Companies like Tesla are coming up with innovative solutions, and just recently announced a battery for your home to take you off the national grid for short periods of time. But in reality, our national grid today has to operate at a surplus all the time, otherwise the electricity goes off. And that surplus currently costs us around about £980 million a year. With fully automated homes, based on your own individual behaviour, those homes can actually tell the network where the spikes might be. They can tell about your home activity. You may be having a party, or you may turn on all your devices at once, and we can communicate that out. And the complex bidding system that the energy companies have to contend with can become far more accurate. But to get to this utopia, we've got some real issues to deal with. The first thing is that manufacturers that have traditionally manufactured widgets now need to speak to those geeky boys about how they provide innovative solutions. We need to bridge a gap. You may have seen things like Hive and that controls your heating at home. We're already seeing these solutions, but what we're seeing is independent bespoke solutions, which means that you're going to have independent apps for every single thing in your house, a separate app for your lighting, one for your home, one for your car, one for your entertainment system. We need a separate standards agency that can provide the wiring between developers and manufacturers. And finally, the biggest one is privacy. And nobody seems to care that companies are collecting so much big data about them. They only care when it's breached. Now, you do hear scare stories about that every one of your touch points in Facebook produces a little piece of data. But if you think about it, of course it's going to. That's not the scary thing. The scary thing is that if somebody takes that data and has my credit card or knows more about me than I'd like them to. Now, certainly, maybe not our international friends, they may have escaped a call like this, but if you think about it, every one of us has had a call like this, or a call like this. It's usually automated. Sometimes you get a person that you can actually shout at. But the feeling is always, how do you know? How do you know this? How do you know I've had PPI? Or I've never been involved in an accident, and certainly haven't been involved in one that was my fault. Where did you get my details from? Now, if you compare this to this is something like what we would provide. This is in your favorite department store. It's based on your purchasing behavior, and it's based on the fact that you've downloaded a loyalty app. You walk up to the store, and you like high heels. I don't like high heels, just in case you're wondering, except on Thursdays. And you get an offer based on your previous purchases. Now, that is far more intrusive. It's actually talking about your physical behavior, your purchasing habits, but you know where it comes from. Now, if you think again about those two, the nuisance caller and fast food restaurants, we've provided loyalty programs for fast food restaurants. So this is kind of insight as to what we as developers know about you using loyalty platforms. When you sign up, you give us your name, your address, your gender, your date of birth, your telephone number, and your email address. We know how often you purchase for this particular restaurant. We know how often you might actually buy a drink with your purchase. We know how likely you are to change your favourite food. And here's the scary one. We know your physical behaviour. We put proximity beacons into every one of the stores so that when you walk past, the beacon broadcasts its presence, your smartphone picks it up and it says, this app was looking for this. So it passes it through to the app, which sends it up to a cloud service, which then says, along with your unique identifier, and it says, I do have an offer for Craig. It sends it back, it shows it as a push notification. Now, if you walk past that same store twice a day, Monday to Friday, we know you work nearby. Now, if you don't do that, we know that you're probably on holiday or there's a change in your habit. We actually know everything about your purchasing behaviour and your physical behaviour, and where you live. And we know a little bit about your temperament because we know how likely you are to respond to the marketing messages we send you. Now, if you think about that, that's quite a lot of information. If you compare that to the nuisance caller that made the PPI call, all he knows is your telephone number. He's bought it from a merchant, he knows nothing else. And we know all this information, and yet it doesn't feel intrusive. Excuse me. Now, the difference between the two is that you are being rewarded for disclosure. You know the source of where that call comes from. If you don't know where the PPI call comes from, you think, has the bank sold my data? Where's my data being sold? Whereas with a loyalty program, you know exactly where that information's come from and you know exactly why you're being delivered that message. And here's a graph in information science that's a pyramid that's often used. And what we collect from your devices and your physical activity is data. When we apply context, that data becomes information. And when we apply behavior and some logic to that information, it becomes knowledge. And given time, that becomes wisdom. Now, as this global nervous system grows and takes with us pieces of our very essence, our very behavior, the way we interact with everything in our world around us, this isn't something that we can just mine anymore. I don't think if the information we're collecting contains our very heartbeat and how often, what our BPM is, it contains a piece of our very essence. So for us to become ubiquitous with the ubiquitous internet as brands, I think we also need to apply a little bit of love and nurture. Thank you.